Kate Morrison stood outside the main conference room on Harmony Prime Station and checked her translation device one more time. The small silver box clipped to her collar hummed softly as it ran through its final system check. Everything looked normal. She had done this routine hundreds of times before, but today felt different. Today could decide if the galaxy would see peace or war. She pushed open the heavy doors and walked into the massive circular room. The ceiling stretched high above her head with windows that showed the swirling colors of the Nexus Nebula beyond. In the center sat a large round table made from polished black stone. Ambassador Charles Bennett already sat on the human side wearing his formal blue uniform. He nodded at Kate as she took her position behind his chair. The other side of the table remained empty, but not for long. Kate heard the distinctive sound of crystalline footsteps approaching from the far entrance. War Prince Vex Thari entered, with 2 guards flanking him. The Zephyrian leader stood nearly 8 feet tall with a body that looked like living crystal. His skin shifted between deep purple and silver as he moved. 4 bright yellow eyes focused on the humans across the table. Kate felt her heart rate increase slightly. She had worked with Zephyrians before, but never with someone so high in their military command. War Prince Vex Thari controlled 3 entire star systems and commanded fleets that could destroy planets. The fact that he came here personally meant the Zephyrians wanted peace as much as humanity did. The War Prince settled into his specially designed chair that could support his crystalline frame. His guards took positions by the walls but kept their hands near their weapons. Kate noticed Ambassador Bennett doing the same thing with his own security detail. Trust came slowly in galactic politics. Ambassador Bennett cleared his throat and began speaking. Kate listened carefully to every word before activating her translation device. The small box glowed blue, and she began converting his greeting into formal Zephyrian diplomatic language. The War Prince tilted his massive head and responded in the clicking tonal language of his people. For the first hour, everything went smoothly. They discussed trade routes and mining rights in neutral space. Kate translated back and forth while making sure to capture not just the words, but the cultural meaning behind them. Zephyrians valued honor above profit, while humans focused on practical benefits. She had learned to bridge these differences over her 15 years as a translator. The conversation grew more complex as they moved to military matters. Both sides had been building up their fleets near the border systems. Neither wanted to appear weak, but both feared that one wrong move could trigger a war that would consume half the galaxy. Kate found herself translating increasingly delicate phrases about weapons limits and patrol schedules. Ambassador Bennett leaned forward as he made a crucial point about human colonies that felt threatened by Zephyrian warships. Kate reached for her translation device to convert his words, but noticed something wrong. The blue glow had turned red and the device felt hot against her collar. She touched it gently and felt it spark against her fingers. A thin line of smoke rose from the translation device just as Ambassador Bennett finished his statement. Kate stared at the broken box in horror. Without it, she could not translate between the 2 languages. The peace talks would have to stop. War Prince Vex Thari waited for her translation, but she had nothing to give him. The room fell completely silent. Ambassador Bennett turned to look at Kate with confusion in his eyes. The Zephyrian guards shifted nervously as their War Prince began to show signs of agitation. His crystalline skin shifted from silver to angry red. In Zephyrian culture, a translator who stopped working during important talks was seen as an insult. Kate felt panic rising in her chest. These talks had taken months to arrange. If they failed now, the 2 most powerful species in the galaxy might go to war. Millions of lives hung in the balance. She looked at the smoking remains of her device and knew she had to do something. She took a deep breath and did something she had never done before in public. She looked directly at War Prince Vex Thari and began speaking in perfect Zephyrian without any technological help. The words flowed from her mouth, as if she had been born speaking the alien language. She translated Ambassador Bennett's statement with perfect accuracy, including the subtle emotional undertones that even advanced devices often missed. War Prince Vex Thari jerked backward in his chair. His 4 eyes widened until they seemed to fill half his face. His skin shifted rapidly through colors that Kate knew indicated extreme shock and disbelief. The two Zephyrian guards looked at each other with confusion before staring at the human woman who spoke their language better than some of their own people. But Kate was not finished. She continued speaking in what she knew was the ancient ceremonial dialect of Zephyrian culture. This was a language that only the highest priests and oldest nobles still remembered. She explained the deep cultural significance of Ambassador Bennett's concerns and related them to ancient Zephyrian concepts of honor and protection. Ambassador Bennett stared at his translator with his mouth hanging open. Captain Frank Rodriguez watched from the observation deck above the conference room with growing alarm. He had worked with Kate Morrison for 5 years and had never heard her speak a single word of Zephyrian without her device. Now she conversed with the War Prince as if she had studied their language for centuries. Dr. Lisa Park and Commander Greg Hayes exchanged worried glances from their positions along the wall. They noticed that Kate's appearance had changed. Her normally brown eyes now showed flecks of silver that seemed to move and shift. Her posture had become more formal, and her voice carried an authority that seemed to come from somewhere beyond her normal personality. War Prince Vexithari slowly rose from his chair. His crystalline form towered over the table as he stared down at Kate. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of ancient tradition and religious significance. Kate translated his words for the humans in the room, but they could all hear the awe and fear in his tonal patterns. "You speak as the ancients spoke," War Prince Vexithari declared in his own language before Kate could translate. "You carry the voice of the first ones. This cannot be possible, but I hear it with my own ears. No human should know the deep speech. No human should understand the old ways. Yet you speak truths that only the star-touched could know." Kate translated his words for the human delegation, but her voice had changed completely. She spoke with the cadence and authority of someone far older and more experienced than the 35-year-old translator they all knew. Her eyes now glowed with silver light that seemed to come from within. The peace talks had become something else entirely. Kate Morrison had revealed an impossible secret that would change everything. Kate Morrison woke up in the medical bay of Harmony Prime, with no memory of how she got there. The last thing she remembered was standing in the conference room watching smoke rise from her broken translation device. Now she lay on a white bed, surrounded by monitors that beeped softly as they tracked her vital signs. Her head felt heavy and her mouth tasted like metal. Dr. Helen Carter stood at a computer terminal nearby studying readings that made no sense to her medical training. She had been the chief medical officer on Harmony Prime for 8 years and had treated every known species in the galaxy. She had never seen brain scans like the ones Kate Morrison was producing. The neural activity patterns went beyond anything recorded in human medicine. Captain Frank Rodriguez sat in a chair next to Kate's bed with his arms crossed and a worried expression on his face. When Kate opened her eyes, he leaned forward and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. She tried to sit up, but he pushed her back down onto the pillow with careful pressure. "Easy there, Kate," Captain Rodriguez said in a soft voice. "You've been unconscious for 6 hours. Dr. Carter wants to run more tests before you try moving around too much. We need to understand what happened in that conference room." Kate looked around the medical bay and noticed 2 more people standing near the Y entrance. Admiral Jack Thompson had arrived from Earth specifically to investigate the incident. His stern face showed both concern and suspicion as he watched Kate wake up. Next to him stood a woman Kate did not recognize wearing the uniform of a science. Officer Dr. Carter approached the bed carrying a tablet filled with medical data. She sat down on the opposite side from Captain Rodriguez and pulled up Kate's brain scans on the device. The images showed neural pathways that seemed to extend beyond normal human brain structure into patterns that looked almost like circuit boards. "Kate, we need you to tell us exactly what happened during the peace talks," Dr. Carter said while showing her the unusual scan results. "Your brain is displaying activity that should be impossible for human physiology. These readings suggest you have neural clusters that exist in quantum states beyond normal space and time." Kate stared at the brain scans and felt a chill run down her spine. She remembered everything that had happened after her translation device broke. She remembered speaking perfect Zephyrian and understanding concepts that no human should be able to grasp. Most importantly, she remembered the feeling of something else sharing space inside her mind. Admiral Thompson stepped closer to the bed with his hands clasped behind his back. His gray eyes studied Kate with the intensity of someone trying to solve a dangerous puzzle. She had heard stories about the Admiral's reputation for getting answers, even when people did not want to give them. Lieutenant Commander Morrison, Admiral Thompson said, using her full rank and title. War Prince Vexithari has refused to continue negotiations with anyone except you. He claims you are something called a voice bearer, and that you hold the key to ancient prophecies his people have been waiting for. I need to know how a human translator suddenly became fluent in languages that died out millions of years ago. Kate took a deep breath and made a decision that would change her life forever. She had kept her secret for 15 years, but now the truth had to come out. The peace of the galaxy might depend on people understanding what had happened to her and what it meant for everyone. 15 years ago, I was part of an archaeological expedition to the ancient ruins on Kepler 482b. Kate began, while looking directly at Admiral Thompson. We were studying Zephyrian historical sites to better understand their culture for diplomatic purposes. I was just a junior translator then, working on my first major assignment. She paused and closed her eyes as the memories came flooding back. The alien ruins had been beautiful and mysterious with technology that no one understood. Kate remembered being drawn to a particular chamber deep underground where strange crystals glowed with their own internal light. I found a device that the archaeological team had missed, Kate continued. It looked like a crystal about the size of my hand, but it pulsed with energy that seemed alive. When I touched it, the crystal activated and somehow merged with my consciousness. I felt knowledge flooding into my mind faster than I could process it. Dr. Carter leaned forward with intense interest. As a medical professional, she wanted to understand how such a merger could be possible without killing the human host. The science officer next to Admiral Thompson began taking notes on a handheld device. The device contained the complete linguistic and cultural knowledge of a species called the progenitors, Kate explained. They were the original builders of galactic civilization millions of years ago. They created the basic patterns that all modern languages follow, and embedded concepts of peace and cooperation into the very structure of communication itself. Admiral Thompson exchanged glances with the science officer. Reports about progenitor artifacts had been classified at the highest levels for decades. Most people in the galaxy believed they were myths told by ancient civilizations. Now a human translator was claiming to carry their actual knowledge inside her mind. Kate opened her eyes and looked at Dr. Carter's brain scans again. She could see the quantum neural clusters that the doctor had identified. They glowed softly in the images like tiny stars scattered throughout her brain tissue. Each cluster contained vast amounts of information stored in dimensions beyond normal space. Every time I access the progenitor knowledge fully, I risk losing more of my human identity, Kate said with fear creeping into her voice. The alien consciousness grows stronger and I become less myself. I can feel it happening even now as we talk. Sometimes I look in the mirror and see someone else looking back at me. Captain Rodriguez squeezed her shoulder gently. He had worked with Kate for years and considered her one of his closest friends. The thought of losing her to an alien intelligence filled him with anger and helplessness. There had to be a way to help her maintain her humanity while using her new abilities. Dr. Carter stood up and walked to another computer terminal. She began running calculations based on Kate's brain scans and the information about the progenitor device. If Kate was telling the truth, then she represented both an incredible opportunity and a terrible danger for humanity and the galaxy. Kate, Dr. Carter said without turning away from her computer screen. How much control do you have over accessing this knowledge? Can you choose when to use it, or does it happen automatically when you encounter certain situations? Kate thought about the question carefully. During the peace talk, she had not consciously decided to speak ancient Zephyrian. The knowledge had simply flowed through her when it was needed. She could feel the alien consciousness waiting just beneath the surface of her thoughts, ready to emerge whenever communication required deeper understanding. I can control it somewhat, but not completely, Kate answered honestly. The stronger my need to understand or communicate becomes, the more the progenitor knowledge takes over. In the conference room, I felt desperate to save the peace talks, and suddenly I could speak languages I had never learned. Admiral Thompson walked to the window that looked out into space. The Nexus Nebula swirled with colors that reminded him of the brain scan patterns Dr. Carter had shown them. He faced an impossible decision that could affect the future of every species in the galaxy. War. Prince Vexathari waited in his quarters for an answer about continuing the negotiations. Other alien leaders had begun arriving at Harmony Prime after hearing rumors about a human who spoke the ancient tongues. Some came seeking wisdom, while others came with suspicion and fear about what Kate Morrison might represent for the balance of galactic power. Dr. Susan Martinez arrived at Harmony Prime with news that made everyone's blood run cold. Her archaeological research ship docked at the station 3 days after Kate's revelation, and she immediately requested an emergency meeting with Admiral Thompson. The woman who had spent 20 years studying ancient alien ruins across the galaxy looked exhausted and frightened as she entered the conference room. "Admiral, we have a serious problem," Dr. Martinez said, as she activated a holographic display that showed a map of the galaxy. Red dots appeared scattered across multiple star systems, indicating locations where her teams had been working. "Every memory crystal site we've been monitoring has activated within the past month. All of them, at once." Kate sat at the conference table, feeling more in control of her abilities than she had since the incident. Dr. Carter had given her medication that helped suppress the alien consciousness when she was not actively using it. Her eyes had returned to their normal brown color, but she could still feel the progenitor knowledge waiting beneath the surface of her thoughts. Admiral Thompson studied the holographic map with growing concern. The red dots formed a pattern that seemed to ring the outer edge of the galaxy like a warning system. Dr. Martinez had been tracking these ancient sites for decades, but had never seen them all activate simultaneously before. "What triggers the activation?" Admiral Thompson asked while pointing to several clusters of red dots. "Is there some kind of external signal that wakes them up, or do they respond to local conditions on each planet?" Dr. Martinez pulled up detailed readings from her research stations. The data showed energy signatures that matched no known technology from any current galactic species. The crystals were broadcasting on frequencies that penetrated hyperspace and reached across impossible distances instantly. "They respond to rising conflict between galactic powers," Dr. Martinez explained. "Every activation corresponds to increased military buildup or diplomatic breakdown somewhere in the galaxy. It's as if the crystals are designed to wake up when civilizations start moving toward war." Kate felt a chill run through her body as she listened to the explanation. The progenitor knowledge in her mind began stirring like something awakening from a long sleep. Images flashed through her consciousness, showing vast fleets of ships that looked nothing like anything built by current galactic species. "There's something else," Kate said as her eyes began showing flecks of silver light. "The crystals aren't just monitoring conflict. They're preparing for something much worse. I can see it in the memories they carry." Dr. Martinez activated another display that showed deep space sensor readings from the galaxy's outer rim. The images revealed dark spots where entire star systems had simply stopped transmitting any signals. No distress calls or explanations, just complete silence spreading inward like a disease. "Our long-range sensors have detected these dead zones, appearing over the past 6 months," Dr. Martinez continued. "At first we thought it might be natural phenomena or equipment failures, but the pattern is too organized to be random. Something is systematically eliminating civilizations starting from the edge of the galaxy." Kate closed her eyes and allowed the progenitor memories to flow more freely through her consciousness. What she saw terrified her more than any nightmare she had ever experienced. The ancient knowledge showed her glimpses of beings that existed as pure entropy and fed on the life force of entire worlds. "They're called the Void Shepherds," Kate said with her voice taking on the deeper tones of the alien consciousness. "The progenitors fought them millions of years ago and lost. The crystals are their final weapon designed to activate when the Shepherds return." Captain Frank Rodriguez watched his friend transform before his eyes. Kate's posture became more formal and her speech patterns shifted to match the ancient knowledge flowing through her mind. He had seen this happen several times since her revelation, and it worried him more each time. Admiral Thompson leaned forward in his chair as he processed the implications of what Kate was telling them. An enemy that had destroyed the most advanced civilization in galactic history was approaching again. The current species of the galaxy possessed technology that was primitive compared to what the progenitors had built. "How do the Void Shepherds attack?" Admiral Thompson asked. "Do they use conventional weapons or some kind of exotic technology that we might be able to defend against?" Kate's eyes now glowed with silver light as the progenitor consciousness took more control. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of millions of years of accumulated knowledge and the pain of an entire species facing extinction. "They don't attack with weapons or fleets," Kate replied, in a tone that seemed to echo from vast distances. "They infiltrate civilizations with mimetic viruses that turn rational beings into paranoid, aggressive isolationists. Fear spreads faster than any disease until species that once cooperated begin seeing enemies everywhere." Dr. Martinez pulled up reports from the Centauri system, where the first confirmed infiltration had begun. Within days, the peaceful Centaurian Republic had split into warring factions. Former allies accused each other of treason, while military commanders refused orders from their own governments. The breakdown happened so quickly that no one understood what was causing it. Once a species becomes sufficiently divided and weakened, the shepherds harvest their life force and move on to the next target. Kate continued as more progenitor memories surfaced. They feed on the energy released when civilizations destroy themselves. The more hatred and fear they can generate, the stronger they become. Captain Amy Foster entered the conference room with urgent reports from across the galaxy. Kate's closest friend and fellow officer looked pale as she handed Admiral Thompson a tablet filled with disturbing intelligence briefings. "Sir, we're receiving reports of military buildups and diplomatic breakdowns throughout the core systems," Captain Foster said while trying not to stare at Kate's transformed appearance. "The human colonial navy has detected unauthorized fleet movements by at least 6 different species. Everyone seems to be preparing for war, but no one can explain why." Kate felt the full weight of the progenitor knowledge pressing against her. Human consciousness. She could see the pattern spreading across the galaxy like a virus designed to destroy civilization from within. The Void Shepherds had already begun their work and time was running out. "There is only one way to stop them," Kate said as her human personality struggled to maintain control. "Every memory crystal must be activated simultaneously to create a galaxy-wide network. The crystals can broadcast a unity frequency that makes it impossible for beings to maintain the hatred and paranoia the shepherds require." Admiral Thompson stood up and walked to the window overlooking the docking bays where ships from dozens of species waited for news about the peace talks. He could see the fear and suspicion growing among the crews as reports of conflict reached them from their home worlds. "What's the cost of activating this network?" Admiral Thompson asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "What happens to you when all the crystals connect?" Kate looked at her friends gathered around the conference table. Captain Rodriguez and Captain Foster watched her with expressions of love and desperate hope. Dr. Carter monitored her vital signs, while Dr. Martinez prepared to record whatever wisdom the ancient consciousness might share. "I must surrender my human identity completely," Kate replied with sadness creeping into her transformed voice. "Once the network activates, I become a permanent conduit for the progenitor consciousness. Kate Morrison will cease to exist and something else will take her place forever." The room fell silent as everyone processed the magnitude of what Kate was proposing. She was offering to sacrifice everything that made her human to save a galaxy that might not even appreciate the cost. The Centauri system fell completely within 48 hours of the first confirmed Void Shepherd infiltration. Reports flooded into Harmony Prime showing former allies turning weapons on each other while accusing longtime friends of betrayal and conspiracy. The Centaurian Republic that had maintained peace for 3 centuries dissolved into chaos as rational beings became consumed with paranoid hatred. Kate Morrison sat in her quarters, staring at intelligence reports that painted a terrifying picture of spreading infection. Her human consciousness fought to stay in control, as the progenitor knowledge pressed against her mind with increasing urgency. She could feel the alien memories showing her exactly how civilizations fell to the shepherds and how little time remained to stop them. Commander Ryan Bell knocked softly on her door before entering with a tray of food she had not touched in hours. Kate's romantic partner of 2 years looked exhausted from trying to coordinate defensive measures while watching the woman he loved slowly disappear into something alien and ancient. "You need to eat something, Kate," Ryan said as he set the tray on her desk and sat down beside her. "Dr. Carter says your human metabolism is struggling to support the energy requirements of the progenitor consciousness. You're burning through calories faster than your body can process them." Kate looked at Ryan with eyes that flickered between brown and silver as her two forms of consciousness competed for control. She reached out and touched his hand with fingers that felt cold despite the warmth of her quarters. The simple human contact helped anchor her to her original identity. "I can feel myself fading, Ryan," Kate said in a voice that sounded more like her normal self than it had in days. "Every time I access the ancient knowledge to understand what's happening, I lose a little more of who I used to be. Soon there won't be enough of Kate Morrison left to remember why saving the galaxy matters." Ryan squeezed her hand and felt tears forming in his eyes. He had fallen in love with a brilliant translator who made him laugh and shared his passion for exploring unknown worlds. Now he watched helplessly as an alien consciousness slowly consumed the mind of the woman he wanted to marry. Admiral Thompson's voice echoed through the station's communication system, calling all senior officers to an emergency briefing. Kate and Ryan made their way to the main conference room where they found representatives from 17 different species gathered around the large table. The mood was grim, as everyone understood they faced an enemy that had destroyed civilizations far more advanced than their own. War Prince Vexithari stood near the observation windows with his crystalline form showing the deep red colors that indicated extreme agitation among his people. The Zephyrian leader had received reports that 3 border systems under his protection were beginning to show signs of the mimetic infection. His own military commanders were starting to question orders and view neighboring fleets with suspicion. Dr. Martinez activated a holographic display that showed the current spread of Shepherd influence across the galaxy. Red zones marked areas where rational cooperation had broken down, while yellow zones indicated regions where the infection was just beginning to take hold. The pattern moved inward from the outer rim, like a disease consuming everything in its path. "The human colonial navy has reported mutinies on 7 different vessels," Admiral Thompson announced as he studied the spreading infection. "Our most disciplined officers are beginning to turn on each other over imagined threats and conspiracy theories. Whatever the Shepherds are using to manipulate minds works on every species we've encountered." Kate felt the progenitor consciousness surge forward as it recognized the crisis reaching a critical point. Her eyes blazed with silver light as ancient knowledge flooded through her human awareness. She stood up from her chair with movements that seemed too graceful for her normal body mechanics. "The infection spreads through normal communication channels," Kate said in the dual voice of human and alien consciousness. "Every conversation, every message, every thought shared between beings carries the potential for contamination. The Shepherds don't need to be physically present to turn civilizations against themselves." Captain Rodriguez entered the conference room with urgent reports from the security teams monitoring the station. Even Harmony Prime was beginning to show signs of infection as crew members from different species started avoiding each other and requesting transfers away from alien sections of the facility. "Sir, I've had to separate the human and Zephyrian security teams," Captain Rodriguez reported to Admiral Thompson. "Both groups are convinced the other is planning some kind of attack. I've seen rational officers I've worked with for years suddenly become paranoid about routine patrol schedules." Kate watched her friend deliver his report and felt a terrible certainty settle over her consciousness. The Shepherds had found their way to the one place in the galaxy where different species had learned to work together in harmony. If Harmony Prime fell to the infection, then hope for galactic cooperation would die with it. War Prince Vexithari approached Kate with careful movements that showed both respect and fear. The ancient Zephyrian prophecies spoke of the voice-bearer, who would appear when the Star Devourers returned, but they also warned that following her guidance would require sacrifices that might destroy everything they were trying to save. "Voice-bearer," War Prince Vexithari said, using the formal title his people had given her. "My fleet commanders report that ships which should defend our worlds are being recalled to protect against imagined threats from our own allies. The poison spreads faster than we can counteract it with reason. Kate felt the full weight of the decision pressing down on her human consciousness. Every moment she delayed meant more civilizations would fall to the shepherd infection. But activating the memory crystal network would mean erasing everything that made her Kate Morrison and becoming something alien that wore her face. Commander Bell stepped forward and placed himself between Kate and the assembled leaders. His face showed the determination of someone willing to fight impossible odds to protect the person he loved most in the universe. "There has to be another way," Ryan said while looking directly at Admiral Thompson. "We're talking about sacrificing Kate's entire identity to save a galaxy that might not even survive the process. How do we know the progenitor solution will actually work against an enemy that already defeated them once before?" Dr. Carter pulled up Kate's latest medical scans on the holographic display. The neural patterns showed increasing integration between human and alien consciousness as the crisis escalated. The quantum clusters in her brain glowed brighter with each passing hour as ancient knowledge prepared for full activation. "The scans suggest Kate is running out of time regardless of what we decide," Dr. Carter said with professional calm that barely concealed her personal anguish. "Her human neural patterns are being gradually overwritten by progenitor data streams. Within 72 hours, there may not be enough of her original personality left to make any choice at all." Kate looked around the conference room at the faces of friends and allies who had become like family during her years of service. Captain Rodriguez, who had protected her through dangerous missions. Captain Foster, who had shared countless quiet conversations about life and dreams. Dr. Carter, who had tended her injuries and celebrated her successes. Ryan, who had shown her what it meant to be loved completely. "I need to test something first," Kate said as her consciousness stabilized into a perfect balance between human and alien awareness. "If I'm going to sacrifice everything I am, then I want to make sure the solution will actually work." She walked to the center of the conference room where everyone could see her clearly. Kate closed her eyes and allowed the progenitor knowledge to flow through her mind with more intensity than ever before. Her body became a conduit for ancient power as she reached out to touch the memories stored in memory crystals across the galaxy. What she found in those crystalline databases terrified and amazed her. The shepherds were closer than anyone realized, and their influence had already begun affecting every major species. But she also discovered something the progenitors had never known about their enemy. Something that might change everything about the choice she faced. Kate Morrison stood in the center of the conference room with her consciousness expanded across the galaxy through the memory crystal network. She could feel the fear and hatred spreading through countless worlds as the Void Shepherds pushed civilizations toward self-destruction. But she had discovered something in the ancient databases that filled her with unexpected hope. The progenitors had made one crucial mistake in their war against the shepherds millions of years ago. They had tried to fight entropy with order and structure with rigid control. The shepherds fed on conflict and division, but they had never encountered something the progenitors lacked completely. They had never faced the stubborn, illogical optimism that made humans refuse to give up even when all hope seemed lost. "I know what we have to do," Kate said, as her eyes blazed with silver light that somehow seemed warmer than before. "The shepherds expect me to become something cold and alien like the progenitors were. They're prepared to fight ancient logic and cosmic authority, but they've never encountered humanity's greatest weapon." Admiral Thompson leaned forward in his chair as he watched Kate's transformation take an unexpected direction. Instead of becoming more alien, she seemed to be finding a balance between her human consciousness and the progenitor knowledge. Her voice carried ancient wisdom, but retained the warmth and determination that had always defined Kate Morrison. "Commander," Ryan Bell stepped closer to the woman he loved and saw something miraculous happening. Kate's brown eyes showed depths of cosmic understanding, but they also held the same kindness and humor that had captured his heart. She was becoming something new rather than simply being replaced by something old. "The unity frequency doesn't have to erase what makes us who we are," Kate continued as she began the activation sequence that would connect every memory crystal across the galaxy. The progenitors tried to impose peace through superior knowledge and technology. But real unity comes from choosing to understand each other despite our differences. War Prince Vexthari watched in amazement as Kate's body became a living conduit for energies that spanned impossible distances. The memory crystals responded to her call with harmonious tones that resonated through hyperspace and reached every civilized world simultaneously. But instead of broadcasting ancient alien concepts, she began telling simple human stories. Kate's voice carried across the galaxy through every communication channel and translation device. She spoke of friendship overcoming fear and love, conquering hatred. She told stories of ordinary people choosing cooperation over conflict even when it seemed easier to fight. Her words reached beings who had never heard of humanity, but somehow understood the universal truths she shared. On a Centaurian warship preparing to attack former allies, the crew suddenly stopped and listened to Kate's broadcast. She told them about a human child who had shared lunch with a classmate from a different culture, and how that simple act of kindness had grown into a lifelong friendship. The Centaurian officers looked at each other and remembered why they had joined the fleet to protect their people, not to destroy other innocent beings. In the Zephyrian border systems where paranoia had turned defenders against each other, Kate's stories reminded warriors of the honor code that valued protecting the weak over defeating enemies. She spoke of human soldiers who had sacrificed themselves to save alien civilians, and how courage meant standing up for what was right even when standing alone. Dr. Susan Martinez monitored the memory crystal network from her research station and watched as something unprecedented began happening. The crystals were not just broadcasting Kate's words, but amplifying the emotional truth behind them. Every being in the galaxy could feel the genuine compassion and hope that drove her message. The Void Shepherds had built their strategy around exploiting fear and division, but they found themselves facing an enemy they could not understand. Kate's broadcast did not force peace upon the galaxy's inhabitants. Instead, it reminded them of the reasons they had chosen to work together in the first place. The mimetic infection that fed on hatred began to weaken when confronted with stubborn human optimism. Captain Frank Rodriguez watched from the observation deck as species representatives throughout Harmony Prime began looking at each other with recognition instead of suspicion. Zephyrian guards who had been avoiding human security teams suddenly offered to share patrol duties. The poison of paranoia could not survive when exposed to genuine efforts at understanding and cooperation. Dr. Helen Carter monitored Kate's vital signs and saw something that should have been impossible. Instead of being consumed by alien consciousness, Kate was somehow transforming both herself and the progenitor knowledge into something entirely new. Her human neural patterns were not disappearing, but evolving to accommodate cosmic awareness while retaining their essential humanity. Across the galaxy, the response to Kate's broadcast exceeded every hope. On worlds where different species had lived in careful segregation, neighbors began reaching out to offer help and friendship. Military commanders who had been preparing for war found themselves organizing joint relief efforts for planets damaged by the early stages of Shepherd infection. The Void Shepherds themselves had never encountered resistance like this before. They were creatures of pure entropy that fed on the energy released when civilizations destroyed themselves. But Kate's message was teaching beings throughout the galaxy that their greatest strength came from supporting each other rather than tearing each other down. War Prince Vexthari approached Kate as her broadcast reached its climax and the memory crystal network achieved full activation. He did not kneel in worship or bow in fear. Instead, he offered his hand in the human gesture of friendship that Kate had taught him during their first conversation. Voice bearer, the War Prince said, using the title with new understanding. You have shown us that the greatest weapon against darkness is not superior force, but the willingness to carry light for others. The Zephyrian people will remember this lesson for all the generations to come. Kate accepted his hand and felt the progenitor consciousness settling into harmony with her human awareness. She had not lost her identity to become something alien. Instead, she had proven that human adaptability and compassion could enhance and improve upon even the most advanced cosmic intelligence. Commander Bell stepped forward and wrapped his arms around Kate as she completed the activation sequence. Her eyes had returned to warm brown, but now they held depths that spoke of understanding every language and culture in the galaxy. She had become a bridge between species that had never existed before. Did it work? Ryan asked as he held the woman he loved and marveled at how she remained essentially herself, despite carrying the wisdom of ancient civilizations. Are the shepherds gone, and will the galaxy be safe now? Kate smiled with the same expression that had always lit up her face when she solved a difficult translation problem. She looked around the conference room at friends who had become family and allies who had become partners in building something beautiful. From the diversity of galactic civilization, the shepherds have withdrawn to find easier targets, Kate replied while feeling the vast network of crystals settling into a new purpose. They feed on division and despair, but they cannot survive in a galaxy that chooses hope over fear. We've learned that our differences make us stronger when we use them to help each other rather than hurt each other. Admiral Thompson stood up and looked out at the swirling colors of the Nexus Nebula that seemed brighter than before. The peace talks that had started with a broken translation device had ended with the transformation of galactic civilization itself. Kate Morrison had saved everyone not by becoming something inhuman, but by proving that humanity's greatest gift was the ability to remain human while embracing impossible change. Years later, when young beings of countless species asked about the Great Unity, they were told the story of a translator whose device broke at exactly the right moment. They learned that the most powerful force in the universe was not technology or weapons, but the courage to speak truth with compassion and the wisdom to listen with an open heart.